This podcast is brought to you by North Carolina's electric cooperatives.
This is NC Spin, an unrehearsed discussion on issues of interest to North Carolinians. Now, here is your moderator, Tom Campbell.
Welcome to this special edition of NC Spin. We're delighted to have a special partnership with 4-H in North Carolina, and always pleased to have a panel of those outstanding 4-H members to let us know the issues in which they are most interested. Let's introduce you to our outstanding panel of 4-Hers. They include Joey Steenwyk, who is from Mebane and Alamance County, Alea Hunsucker from Lexington and Davidson County, Josh Wilson from Lincolnton and Catawba County, and Grace LaHay from Elm City in Wilson County. Before we begin to explore the specific topics we want to talk about on this show, it's always interesting to get to know more about our panelists. So I want to begin in asking you whether you go to private school, public school, or homeschool. Tell us what year you're in. Josh?
I am homeschooled, and I am currently I will be moving up to 11th grade this fall.
Okay. And Grace?
I'm currently homeschooled and I'll be a senior.
Senior. Zoe?
I am homeschooled and also dually enrolled at Alamance Community College, and I am a rising senior.
All right.
I was homeschooled, just graduated this spring, and now I attend Davidson County Community College.
I think this is very interesting. All four of you homeschool. If you don't mind, Zoe, tell me, why homeschool? Why did you choose, or your parents choose, homeschooling versus, say, public schools or private schools?
I think that's a really good question. The main reason I think my parents chose to homeschool me my whole life was for the versatility and being able to choose whatever subjects. So not just sticking to a certain curriculum.
Leah?
I think mine was very similar. We also had a lot of opportunities to travel and see national monuments. I was also able to travel out of the country and learn more about other cultures as well.
Josh?
My mom was not really a big fan of the educational system at the time that I started school. So she just, much like Zoe, she wanted me to pick and choose my subjects instead of having to stick with the common.
Grace?
And like what Zoe was saying, my parents like choosing the subjects that fit my personality, and also the fact that my parents can spend more time with me every single day.
Interesting. Now, you guys belong to what is termed the millennial generation, and there's a lot of discussion about how your age group differs from Generation X, Generation Y, the baby boomers, and so forth like that. I want to ask you to how you would best describe millennial generation. Grace?
So before I begin, you have to realize that before us we have the generation. We were raised by the generation before us, and we carry those traits. And so with that said, I believe we are very quick-minded with our technology, and we're a tick impatient with our technology, and we get answers really quick.
Zoe?
I would say we're definitely technology dependent. And I would also say that we're very open-minded to a lot of different opinions, and we've heard a lot of different generations having different ideals, different qualities they value, all in the same generation.
Alea, I read a book not long ago that said that 60% of the waking hours your generation spent is awake, is spent with devices. Is that fairly, electronic devices, is that fairly accurate?
I think, or I'd say that a lot of young people that I know that does pertain to, but for me personally, I like to use it as a tool to access information, but I still highly value, I guess, word of mouth and paper devices.
Well, I want to get to that. Josh, would you call yourself a liberal, a moderate, or conservative?
I would say that I'm more moderate, but leaning more toward conservative.
Okay. And Grace?
I would consider myself a conservative. I believe in keeping the traditions, but also being open-minded about your opinions.
Zoe?
I am definitely moderate. I agree with many of the conservative traits as well as lots of liberal ideas.
Alea?
I call myself a moderate, or what some people might say, common sense American.
Okay. Now, so then the question becomes, how would you describe the current climate of this country, particularly political climate of the country? Alea?
I'd say the political climate at the moment is a lot cooler than it was, say, 6 months ago, which I'm definitely happy about. I feel like we've come to a point where we can express ideas and talk about what's going on instead of it being so heated.
Yeah, it was very heated and partisan a long time. Zoe?
I agree with what Alea said, honestly. We're definitely a lot more accepting of each other as to when elections were still going on and everyone was just back and forth at each other constantly.
Anybody disagree with that?
I agree.
Grace? Josh?
I feel like it is still heated, but less so than it was during the elections when you had family practically disowning each other because of different political opinions.
Blood feuds between different presidential candidates and so forth. All right, so Alea, you talked about keeping up and checking many sources. I think our audience would be interested in finding out, how do you get updated news? What sources do you use? Television, newspapers, radio, internet, social media, what?
I mostly go to the internet because the internet is updated so frequently. All right.
Grace?
I've never been too much into TV. It's more like verbally through my parents and friends.
Until you became a TV star on NC Zoe?
I use the internet, but I use a lot of radio, even though it seemed kind of old-fashioned.
Alea?
I definitely value radio. I listen to NPR and BBC News quite a bit.
So how closely do you keep up with national events? For instance, are you following the big discussion about repealing and replacing Obamacare? Is that something that you're paying attention to, or not much interest? You're nodding your head.
I am paying attention to it. I think it's a huge issue that concerns everyone in the nation.
Anybody else?
I've definitely been paying attention to it as well.
So when folks say that the people out in the mainstream of America aren't listening and aren't paying it, how about this business about the Russian interference with the 2016 elections, Grace?
I think it's rigged. I mean, I think that we were able to not realize that it wasn't, we were able to realize that it wasn't real, and we could stop any issue.
Yeah. Another national issue that a lot of people are talking about right now is immigration, Josh. How do you view immigration?
Immigration has always been part of American society. I mean, ever since the Pilgrims, especially in the 1920s, I feel like immigrants are important to America. We just do need to be a bit more, what's the word I'm looking for here? We need to be a bit
more careful about
immigrants we bring in.
So, I mean, do you agree with this business about trying to build a wall between America and Mexico?
I'd like to say definitely that we need immigration reform. I do not think that a wall is an answer. I do know, however, that we do need immigration into this country to have strong international relationships. I know that many immigrants want to sow back into our economy, and I think we need to preserve that.
Okay. Anybody disagree with that position? All right. Well, we thank you for watching NC Spin on the air or on YouTube. Here's a reminder, there's much more on our website, ncspin.com, or NC Spin on Facebook. You'll find video footage not seen anywhere else, perspective pieces from our panel, and our weekly column. Get more balanced debate from the Old North State on ncspin.com, NC Spin on Facebook, or on Twitter at NC Spin Tweets. When we come back, we're going to ask our 4-H'ers about North Carolina issues.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
The cost of everything has gone up dramatically over the last 75 years. With one exception, keeping electricity affordable. That's the power of your co-op membership. Learn more at togetherwesave.com.
North Carolina's Touchstone Energy Cooperatives, looking out for you.
The North Carolina General Assembly recently gave state retirees a well-deserved cost of living increase. Now local governments across North Carolina need to follow the legislature's lead and include retiree cost of living increases in their budgets. These increases are long overdue and desperately needed by all our retirees. The legislature heard us, and they did what's right. It's time for local governments to do the same. Learn more at ncrgea.com.
We now return to NC Spin.
We continue our discussion with outstanding millennials and 4-H'ers from North Carolina. I want to shift the focus to the state of North Carolina, and I want to ask each of you, what do you consider the biggest problem facing our state right now? Leah, I'll start with you.
I'd say that the biggest problem facing our state right now is definitely ignorance on issues nationally and locally. If people don't understand what is going on and what are feasible solutions, then no progress can actually be made. And I think people need to realize that.
You know, it's really interesting because one of the things we quote on this show is a Thomas Jefferson quote, which says an informed electorate is the cornerstone of a democracy. And if people don't pay attention and they don't get information, you're right. All right, Zoe, what would you say? Biggest issue facing North Carolina?
I would definitely say the access to mental health facilities.
Interesting.
It's very difficult for people to go through all the medical paperwork, forms, making appointments when they need that kind of help. And I feel like it's unnecessarily difficult for the people who require those facilities.
And a shortage of beds and psychiatrists? I mean,
yes.
Yeah, okay. All right, Grace, tell me what you think the biggest problem in North Carolina is.
Right now, I think it's education. And when you think about education, you may think it's a teacher's fault, but in my opinion, I think it's the students, and they need their mindset, they need to look at their resources, and it's not just the teacher's fault.
Interesting. Josh?
I have to agree with Grace. I'd say that education is a pretty big problem on the students' part because there's so many students that are just not wanting to learn, really.
Yeah. All right, so would you say you pay closer attention to North Carolina issues than you do national issues, or less attention, Zoe?
I try to stay very updated on North Carolina. However, there's so much more coverage and easier ways to get in touch with the national news. Not to mention there's so much going on. Not to say that there's not enough in North Carolina.
Would anybody say North Carolina more than national? Pretty much a consensus on this. Okay, Democrat Roy Cooper was elected governor in November and faces a legislature largely controlled by Republicans. And you guys were at the legislature in June, and I know you went and saw how things are working over in the legislature. This past session was marked with the legislature passing bills, Cooper vetoing the bills, and then the legislature overriding them. A recent poll came out talking about Governor Cooper's popularity. So tell me how you would rate the performance of Governor Cooper so far.
Honestly, I'm not quite sure how to rate the performance of Governor Cooper because I don't feel like he's actually made much progress, and I think that says a lot, is that we haven't heard about what it is that he's moving forward with and doing. So I'd say probably a solid B-.
Okay, all right, interesting. Zoe?
I don't have a great rating scale. However, I would say that it's difficult to determine because every time he tries to make an action, it doesn't follow through. So I think he has good ideas. However, I don't know that they're necessarily being followed through with.
Interesting. And Grace?
In my opinion, it's hard for a governor to make big decisions because our legislators are so powerful.
Josh?
I feel like Cooper it is hard to judge him, especially since he's been, having a staring contest with the legislature so much. But I'd say that he definitely has ideas, but he may not have the ability to follow through with those ideas very well.
They're not cooperating together very well.
Exactly.
All right. I know y'all went over to the General Assembly, as I said earlier, in June. I'd be interested, and I think our audience would be interested in here. What were your impressions? I know you watched the session, you spoke to some legislators and so forth like that. What were your impressions of the legislature, Zoe?
Well, I had mixed reviews. So I had some legislators that I felt very valued and involved, and they wanted me to know what is going on so that I can then make informed decisions as a citizen. And then I also had some feelings where some people might have wanted me to just take a step back, let things happen as they played out.
Interesting observation. Anyone else?
Yeah, I definitely say that I agree with you. There are some people that definitely want to bring young people into politics and hear their valued ideas about changes that could be made, but there are also some that want to go ahead and sit out the rest of their term without very much notice.
Anyone else?
That makes sense.
It was definitely interesting to speak with our legislators and get some, behind the scenes perspective about issues that are going on. I always think that's an interesting thing to do.
Grace?
I like to compliment them a lot because they care about us locally and where we live and how everything's going on.
One of the big topics in our state over the past year and going into this legislative session was HB 2, and I know you've heard an awful lot about that. Some say it was the reason former Governor Pat McCrory was defeated in his bid for re-election, and the legislature essentially repealed HB 2. Where do you see this issue now? What do you think is going on so far as transgenders, civil rights of all people, and so forth like that? Grace?
I believe that, well, I'm not very knowledgeable on that topic.
Okay, that's all right. How would you say, Zoe?
I think that's a really tough question, and
it's a very divisive issue.
It is.
Any opinions about it, though?
I'd say definitely that what a lot of people don't realize about House Bill 2 is that after it was repealed, another bill was introduced, which was House Bill 142, which reintroduced a whole nother set of issues. And I feel like people just didn't understand which side it was that they were arguing for and all that the bill included exactly and what was going to, what changes were going to be made.
Anything to add, Josh?
I feel like HB 2 is, because it was so controversial when it was introduced, hardly anyone can open their mouth to say anything positive or negative about it for fear of they'll get attacked by
it was
somebody.
Such a divisive, it was such a divisive issue, and I don't know that everybody totally understood what it did or didn't do, for that matter. We've seen a lot of increases in violence, particularly shootings in this state over the past years, even though violence per se is at a lower level than what it has been in recent years. But there are a lot of people who say we need to severely restrict the numbers and types of guns that are being sold, especially to those people that have mental illnesses. One of the laws that came up before the General Assembly was to do away with restrictions on concealed carry permits. I'd be interested in hearing what's your feeling about gun control, and particularly on this concealed carry issue, Grace?
I think the problem is not necessarily the gun, but the person that's holding the gun. And I think after, your training course, you would have knowledge of how to deal with that.
But does that mean that we need to be more careful about who we license to have guns?
Yeah, I think we need to bump up our training.
Yeah. Alea?
I feel that no matter how much training goes into the concealed carry permits, that people that were not trained with the guns will always find the arms. And I feel that more of the training could be put into young people and basically how to treat people with respect and how to treat firearms with respect.
Yeah, interesting perspective. Josh?
I feel like our gun laws now, especially our concealed carry laws, are well and good. The one thing I am concerned about is that we don't have a state gun registry. So in case someone were to have their gun stolen and a crime was committed with it, they would not be able to, inform the police that their gun had been stolen.
Good point. Zoe?
I agree with the fact that we need more training on our how to handle guns, but I also think that there's a very fine line between training and restricting. And I think that that's something that we need to sort out and figure out what the people really feel about this issue.
There were several bills involving alcohol in this past session. I guess probably the one that came up at the very end of the session, we called it the brunch bill because North Carolina essentially would be eliminating the long-standing blue laws in our state, which said that grocery stores, beer and wine places couldn't sell beer until after the church service hour was over. Many others say, wait a minute, the state shouldn't be controlling when beer and wine and mixed drinks were sold. This is a loaded question. Alea, what's your opinion of this?
My opinion is honestly that the United States we respect freedom of religion, and that while I myself might be in church service on Sunday mornings, not everyone will be in church service, and they should have the freedom to drink on Sunday mornings if they would like.
Zoe, somebody said, well, we ought to at least wait for the benediction before we start selling the mimosas and beer and wine. Where do you stand on this?
Well, I very much agree with Alea, and it also reminds me of some of the hunting laws, how you're not allowed to hunt during certain times on Sundays, and I honestly think that whether you are religious or non-religious, whether you go to church or do not, you should be able to do pretty much whatever you want on a Sunday.
I do feel like with the brunch bill, the people who are opposed to drinking alcohol before church services and don't necessarily have to purchase alcohol before church services end. I mean, if they're against it, they don't have to follow it.
We're running out of time on this segment, but there's one particular issue I've got to ask you about. We hear an awful lot of talk about opioid addiction, particularly with young people. How big a problem do you find this to be in your local community, Grace?
I think it's a very big issue, and I'm not sure exactly how to fix it, but it's definitely something we need to look at.
I don't think anybody knows exactly how to fix it. Josh?
I have not heard about this, honestly, but I do feel like if it is an issue, we do need to have some restriction to it.
Alea?
I feel that substance abuse in general with young people is a huge issue, and I believe it's because it's just generally not talked about, especially in my area. So I feel like that would be a way to help remedy that.
And it's so readily available now. Exactly. Zoe?
I'm actually very surprised to hear that it's not as talked about in your area, because it's very talked about where I live. And I think that opioid abuse is a serious issue because it starts with kids going to the doctor for a sports injury or some athletic injury and getting addicted to painkillers.
We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to ask these 4-H'ers what they think about education.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
I hear it all the time. Rising health care costs are squeezing North Carolina families. Deductibles continue to climb, prescription drug prices are skyrocketing, medical bills are unknown until they arrive in the mail, and premiums are increasing by double digits. This is decimating family budgets. We should be focused on education and jobs, not EpiPen cost and medical bill errors. We need quality, affordable, and transparent health care for our families.
I help educate and inspire visually impaired students to strive for a brighter future.
I make sure visitors to the North Carolina Zoo take a walk on the wild side.
And I make sure that the fuel you buy is a quality product from pipeline to pump.
I support small businesses in North Carolina by matching them with hard-working, well-trained employees.
I make sure the roads you drive on are safe.
Scenic, the one voice speaking in support of the men and women who are making North Carolina great.
You sleep on concrete till your body get immune to concrete.
My mom got my brother and I up and said, come on, we're leaving.
I became homeless in the beginning of this year.
When I was about 4 or 5 years old, our house caught fire.
I used to see my brother. If he see me, he'd turn and go the other direction.
We did the only thing that we could think of, and we went to a Salvation Army shelter.
You know, we don't have this, like, what's your background look like? We just say, what do you need?
I remember the man from the Salvation Army coming down with a box of clothes.
The Salvation Army officer bought my brother and I an ice cream cone.
Last week, my brother walked up to me, and he just started a conversation.
Today I've given my life to the Salvation Army because I remember what somebody did for me, my brother, and my mom over 30 years ago.
The Salvation Army for me means hope.
Compassion.
Family.
Support.
So we talked about the fact that all of you were homeschooled, but I'd still like to have your opinions about how would you rate the education system in North Carolina on a letter grade of A to F? Josh?
At the very highest, I would say probably a C.
Interesting. Grace?
I would say an A, just because I have friends that they complain about their teachers, but I think it's, like I said earlier, about their mindset.
Zoe?
I would say a C. And I have never been in a public school. However, I see in my community college kids coming in for their first English classes not knowing the basic rules of grammar or punctuation.
Alea?
I'd say C+, simply because with so many programs such as ag and home ec being cut, people aren't prepared for a career of any sort.
The National Achievement Test showed North Carolina students performing just a little bit better in English and about average in math. The goal, of course, is to be above the national average. Why do you think North Carolina students aren't doing better in national competitions, Zoe?
I honestly don't have a good answer.
All right. Alea?
I'd say it's because of teacher pay. I feel like a lot of teachers are leaving the state to find good teaching jobs.
Josh?
I'd say it might be because North Carolina is a very rural state, and children going into school might have grown up not really needing those skills as much.
Grace?
And a lot of students mainly like to focus on athletics more than academics.
So some of this is motivation.
Yes.
All right. We're going to take a break and we're going to ask them about the future. Stay with us.
NC Spin is brought to you in part by the North Carolina Farm Bureau. The Farm Bureau and Agriculture. We keep North Carolina growing.
The healthcare landscape is filled with questions and uncertainties of changes that are coming. In these times of change, there's one thing you can trust. You can trust your family physician to work for you, not only in treating sickness and disease, but also your overall health. Regardless of how healthcare might change, the men and women of the North Carolina Academy of Family Physicians pledge to work upholding your trust. Family physicians, your trusted healthcare advisors.
I help educate and inspire visually impaired students to strive for a brighter future.
I make sure visitors to the North Carolina Zoo take a walk on the wild side.
And I make sure that the fuel you buy is a quality product from pipeline to pump.
I support small businesses in North Carolina by matching them with hard-working, well-trained employees.
I make sure the roads you drive on are safe.
Steenwyk, the one voice speaking in support of the men and women who are making North Carolina great.
We got about a minute left in the show, but I want to ask you, as far as the future is concerned, are you generally optimistic, uncertain, or pessimistic? Josh?
I'm uncertain but optimistic.
Grace?
I definitely do.
Zoe?
Very positive.
Alea?
I definitely see a bright future.
All right, do you think you're going to be able to achieve the same or better lifestyle than your parents, and do you really want to? Grace?
Yes, I do.
I feel like every generation should want to do better than their parents did.
All right.
It's the same, if not better.
Better.
All right. I got to tell you, we've thoroughly enjoyed this, and I want to thank Josh and Grace and Zoe and Alea for being with us. And we hope you've enjoyed a panel of 4-H'ers. We thank them for offering their viewpoints. To stay informed all during the week, give your feedback, and read my weekly column, visit our website, ncspin.com, or catch NC Spin on Facebook. And join us next week when we return to our regular format of more balanced debate for the Old North State. Until then, stay informed and watch out for the spin.
Join us next week and get the spin on issues facing our state.